Welcome to the PHP Essential Training Series. I'm Mike King, your host, and in this tutorial we'll be looking at the switch case statement in PHP. Again, just as a reminder, you're going to need a good text editor, and we'll need your WAMP or MAMP server up and running when we get into the exercise of this particular tutorial. So, the switch case statement in PHP is used to test an expression with different values. The statement is an alternative to the if, elseif, else statements. And you'll see as we go through the exercises, when we get into that portion of the tutorial, I'm actually going to make a comparison between the switch statement and the if, elseif, else statement. By the way, the if, elseif, else statement does almost the exact same thing, but it's a little more difficult to write when numerous conditions are needed. And you'll see that as we go through the examples when we get into the tutorial section. The switch case tests a variable against a series of conditions until it finds a match, and then executes a block of code corresponding to the match itself. If a match is not found, a default code block can be entered to pick up all the variable values that do not match a condition of the switch case statement, and you'll see that in the demonstration. There's one very important difference between the switch case and the if, elseif, else statement. The switch case statement executes line by line, and once a true evaluation is found, it executes all case statements until the end of the switch block is determined. This can be avoided by using a break statement. I'm actually going to give you a demonstration of what I mean by this, so if you're a little confused, don't worry about it. We're going to go over it in the exercise. But when a value is matched inside the switch statement, it actually will execute all the case statements till the end of the switch block. And you'll see what I mean by that. There's a way around it too. There's a fix, or not a fix, but there's a way to avoid that. To prevent this, we add a break statement to the end of each case block of code. The break statement tells PHP to break out of the switch case statement block once it executes the code associated with the first true case. And again, we'll demonstrate this in the exercise. So if you're a little bit confused, don't worry, we're going to go over it. So now let's demonstrate in our development environment we just talked about in this presentation. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and drop out of our presentation. Let's drop into our development environment. First thing I want to do is I want to confirm that we have our Apache server up and running. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up and make certain that we've got it up and running, which we do, because we'll be using the server for this demonstration. I also going to load my text editor. I'm going to be using Sublime Text 2 for this particular demonstration. And Google Chrome will be the browser that I will use for this demonstration. So the first thing I want you to be aware of is I'm using my template.php file, which I've used in quite a few of the previous tutorials. I've got it set up with just my generic CSS file, which gives me this nice little display in my browser, and my title. That's it. Not a whole lot to it, just again that basic generic template file and a small CSS file just to give me the outlines and my heading. And this is just a generic HTML5 document with my container, my title, and I got a div class of demo where I actually put all the code is inside this darker gray area. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is exercise 1. The first thing we're going to do is let's write our first switch case statement so you can see how these are laid out. So you don't have to watch me type. I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this from my text editor. So inside my demo div, I'm just going to go ahead and open up a PHP block, because obviously this will be PHP code. I'm going to come down to the bottom and close that block. And the first thing I want to do is I want to create a variable inside my PHP block. So I'm going to come down and paste in this variable Jim that I just created. So I have a variable named name, and currently the value inside that variable is Jim. And now I'm actually going to build this switch case statement. And again, I'm just going to paste this in so you don't have to watch me type, but we will discuss it once we get it in place. So I have a switch, and then I have a case. So the switch is actually bringing in fact, you know what, let me clean this up first, and then let's get everything cleaned up a little bit. And there we go. Extend this a little bit so we don't have that line wrap, so you can actually see what's going on there. So I've created a variable named name, and I've given it a value of Jim. And then I set up my switch statement, and I put the name of that variable inside my switch, because that's what I want to compare. And then I have all these little case statements. So I'm saying if the switch is equal to Mike, then I'm going to run this. If it's equal to Kim, I'm going to run this. If it's equal to Peter, I'm going to run this. So I'm actually taking whatever the value of the variable is, I'm comparing it with these different cases, and then based on when the case is found, it's going to echo out what we see on the screen. So let me go ahead and clean this up a little bit. Let me bring my closing PHP tag up. I'm going to go ahead and save all these changes, but I want to do a save as. Let's save this as switch_1.php. And again, this is if you have access to the exercise files. If you've purchased the tutorial set, you'll have access to all these files, and I want you to be able to follow along with us as we go through here. So every time we make changes to this, we'll change it with a different name, so you'll have all the changes that we've made. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to go back and refresh my browser window. Let's load up switch_1.php, and you'll see now that I've got responses. So it hit the Jim. It says, yep, you know what the case is, Jim, so the registered name is Jim. The problem that we have here is you'll notice it also did everything past it. So as we talked about in the presentation, once it finds a match for that case, it executes all the case statements to the end of the switch block. Well, that's not exactly what we were looking for, because it says the registered name is Jim, the registered name is Mark, the name is not in the database, which are the rest of the case statements once that thing is met, or once that case is met. So there is a way to fix that. We can actually go in here and we can add a break statement that basically tells, I'm going to go ahead and copy that. It tells the switch that, hey, when you find a match, break out, we're done. I only want you to run the case code that's inside this particular case, so run these two lines and then stop. I'm going to go ahead and add that break statement to all of our code, even though we're not above the top ones yet. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in each line or each case. So each case has its own individual break statement. I'm going to go ahead and save that change, and now you'll notice when we execute this code, we should get the registered name as Jim, and it should break out of the case. So that's what we were actually looking for. It came down and found the case that matched, gave us that line of code, and the break statement took us out of the code and said, okay, we're done with the switch. If I were to change the value of the variable, let's go ahead and change it to Mike, for example. We know that Mike is the first case inside of our switch block. Refresh our code, the registered name is Mike, and then again it breaks out because we have that break statement there. If I have a name that's not in the database, put in Stanley, it should run all the way down to the default and tell us that that name's not in the database. We don't have that name in there. So the switch case statement is a very good way to compare, make a lot of comparisons where we're not using the if or else if, because I mean that can get pretty complicated, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Let's actually do an elseif that compares what we've just done here. I'm going to go ahead and add a few break statements after our block of PHP. Let me go ahead and put in a few breaks so we have some lines in here. And then we're going to do the same thing we've done at the top, but this time we're going to do it with an if else if statement. Alright, so what I want to do is I actually want to duplicate what we've done with the switch case, but I want to duplicate it with an an if else if statement so you can see the comparison and why I think the switch case actually works a little better. Let me go down below our break statements. I'm going to go ahead and open up my PHP block, come down a few lines and close that block of code. Let's go ahead and save that change to our switch_1.file. I'm going to go ahead and create another variable just like we did in the previous example. So I'm going to come right inside that block of PHP, create that variable called name with the value of Jim. And now I'm going to actually go put in that if else if. So I'm going to copy this. And we already covered this one in our tutorial, so you should be pretty familiar with how this if else if statement works. Let me go clean up our formatting here. So you can see I have the if, then else if, and what I'm doing is I'm doing the same thing that we had basically done with our switch statement. I'm looking for a match for that name variable, and I'm saying if the name is equal to Mike, if the name is equal to Kim, and remember we're using the double equal signs here because it's a comparison operator, not an assignment operator. I get a lot of emails from people that are taking some of the classes I have online, and they'll say, hey Mike, for some reason my code's not working, and I'll look through their code and they'll be making an assignment with name equal Mike. Remember, when we say name equal Mike, we're assigning Mike to the variable value. We're not comparing it. So we have single is assignment, double is compare, and triple is exact compare. That's not only is it the correct data, but it's the correct data type. So if it's a string, it's a string with that value. If it's a numeric, it's numeric with that value. So remember, those operators can bite us in the butt. Anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about. So here we have the if-else-if statement doing basically the same thing we had done with the switch case statement on top. If I save all those changes, refresh the browser window, hang on, let me go back and change this. I'm going to make these the same because I actually want the same response. I'm just going to put Mike, and I'm going to come down here and change this one to Mike. Save all the changes. Let's go back and refresh our browser window. And now we got the registered name is Mike, the registered name is Mike. So it's actually picking it up in the database just as we expected it would. I just think the one with the if-else-if is a little bit more confusing to read. Let me go ahead and do a refresh. So we have one now that's Mike and one now that I had it set up as, see what I did? I changed the actual value and not the comparison variable. There we go. Gotta be careful when you're working with code. Anyway, I think this one, the if-else-if, is a little bit more difficult to read, especially if you get a bunch of different statements in here that you want executed if that condition is met. Because I mean, then it becomes very, very long. Now here, everything seems to be, to me, it's a lot neater. I can put a whole bunch of different statements in here because I can run functions. I can, anything I want to run inside that case I can run, but to me it just looks, it's easier to follow this code, in my opinion, than it is to follow this code. And especially if there's a few hundred different things that you're comparing. Like, so I could have, because I've actually put case select statements together, switch case statements. Actually, I used to call them case select. But I've actually put them together where they're read from a database, and it may have 100 different countries in there or something, and based on what you select is where it's going to go off in the code. So these can get pretty complex, and in my opinion, it's easier to use the switch case than it is to use the else if. It just looks cleaner. And again, just a personal opinion. I want to do one more demonstration on the switch case because I want to show you that you can actually get dynamic data from this. So let's do one more demonstration in the switch case, and then we'll move on to our next tutorial. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do, let me go ahead and clean this up. Let's take some of this code out of here. We're going to actually save this under a new name. Let's get it cleaned up. So all we have left now is our little demo. I'm going to do a save as. Let's do a save as and save this as switch_2.php. This way we're not going to overwrite that original demonstration we did, because that's still there. If I go and load switch_2, that one should be empty, which it is. All right, because I want to do one more demonstration of how we use these switch case statements. And again, basically this one's going to be a little bit more dynamic than the two we've done in the past. What I want to do is let's go ahead and open up our PHP tags so we can have some PHP code inside of our HTML document. Go ahead and clean up our formatting a little bit, save that change. And then I want to go in here, I'm going to create a variable, but this variable is going to be a little bit different than what we created in the previous examples, because it's actually going to be a dynamic variable. I'm creating a variable called today, and then I'm going to use a built-in function in PHP to pull out the day of the week. And that's actually what I'm doing with this date function. If you look at the PHP manual, you'll see that a capital D will return to me the correct day of the week in 3-character format. So it's going to be like Monday would be MON, Tuesday would be TUE, but that's all in the PHP.net manual if you want to go in and look it up. It's currently at, let me go show you what I mean here and bring up that website for PHP.net, because there actually is a lot of good information there. If you go to the PHP.net website, you'll see that you can actually go into the area of date formats, and if I use a capital D, it's a textual representation of a day, 3 letters, so it's Monday through Sunday, 3-letter day of the week. There are a bunch of different format options that you can do using this date function that's built into PHP, and I tend to use the date function quite a bit. So that's basically what I'm doing here. I'm using that date function and I'm returning the current day of the week in a 3-character format. And the reason I'm doing that is because what I'm going to do when I set up my PHP or my switch case statement in PHP, you're going to see, I'm going to come right down below here, put this in place, and go ahead and clean up our formatting a little bit. So basically what I've asked it is said, okay, depending upon the day of the week, I want you to print out a different echo statement to my browser. And I happen to be recording this on a Monday, so I should get the Monday's return. Depending upon what day of the week you're actually working through this exercise will determine what you're going to see in your returns. I'm going to go ahead and save that as switch2_2.php, refresh my browser window, and it tells you today's Monday, clean your house. And again, I'm actually recording this very early on a Monday morning, so that is why I'm seeing that. Depending upon what day you actually work through this exercise, you're going to see yours based on the day of the week that it is that you're actually doing the exercise. But again, very, very good that you can use switch case. Again, I'm pulling something dynamically from the server to get the day of the week, and then based on the case, I'm actually displaying different text on my screen. And you'll notice again, I did use that break statement below each case once the case is complete, because I actually want to break out of that code and end that particular switch block. So I hope this helps you understand why the switch case statement is used so often in PHP. We do tend to use it quite a bit. I use it with a lot of the code that I do based on categories and types of tutorials. And so I'll actually use things to build path statements based on switch case statements. So there's a lot of things you can use it for. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.